Virgin Most Powerful Radio, sharing the gospel with clarity and charity.
And now, Virgin Most Powerful Radio is pleased to present Hands-On Apologetics with renowned Catholic author and apologist, Gary Michuta.
And welcome everybody, Hands-On Apologetics. You have entered into Virgin Most Powerful's Apologetics Dojo. It's great to be with you today, and got a fantastic show in store for us indeed, because we're going to be talking about Islam, and specifically what every Catholic needs to know about Islam. And to help us do that, we're going to have our author, actually a person new to the show, William Kilpatrick, and what every Catholic needs to know about Islam. And unfortunately, the video's down. I was holding up the book to the monitor. But anyway, that's going to be fascinating. We're going to talk about Islam. It's dangerous. Is it safe? Is it tame? Is it a lion? What should we know about it? And there's many conflicting views. And indeed, because of that, we need some clarity. Exactly what does Islam teach, and what we need to do to get a firm grasp on what it is. So that'll be coming up on the other side of the break. In the meantime, we're going to have our Finding the Fallacy. Today is Friday, and you know what that means. Since it's Friday, it's propaganda time. And what a better time to go through all the different propaganda techniques than during political season, elections and stuff, where propaganda runs amok. And the neat thing about looking at propaganda is when you're able to identify it, its magic and influence disappears. So that's part of our job right now, is to help you identify it so that you're not affected by it. Today's propaganda technique is grabbing the rhetorical middle. And so that's a fascinating one, used quite a bit, by the way, especially in debates. And also we meet an early church father. Today's early church father is Pope St. Damasus I. Pope St. Damasus I, very important early pope, and got great stuff in store for us. And again, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. Let's do our shout-out, shall we? I want to welcome all of you watching live stream on Facebook and YouTube. Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard. Great to see familiar names there in the chat room. Also, I want to welcome all of you listening on radio and also via podcast around the world through our handy-dandy phone app, and also through our flagship website, which is virginmostpowerfulradio.org. virginmostpowerfulradio.org. Check it out, folks. By the way, thank you so much for subscribing and liking and ringing the bell and doing all that stuff. We truly appreciate it. It makes visibility possible, and the more visible you are, the more people you can reach, the more souls you can help. And that's our mission. Our mission here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio is to make Jesus better known and loved every day. And so we thank you for doing that, because we're together in this mission. Speaking of missions, I also want to mention this project that I unleashed a couple of weeks ago. I also want to encourage you, please support it, check it out. It's a new YouTube channel. It's called the Apocrypha Apocalypse. And basically, I'm going to be unrolling videos that focus in on the question of the deuterocanonical books, those 7 Old Testament books that Protestantism rejects, and really is the quintessential question, in my opinion, between Catholic and Protestant apologetics. I'm going to be putting a lot of information out there that you won't be able to find anywhere else, except perhaps in my writings. And, since people don't read, this is a great way to reach them. And I'm also going to do some live stream things on YouTube as well. In fact, I think William Albrecht and I are going to do a live stream there probably next week. And we're going to talk about the Trinity in the Deuterocanon. So if you could, please check out Apocrypha Apocalypse. Subscribe if you will. or also help me out there. I appreciate it. Get this project off the ground. And let's see. If you have any questions for William Kilpatrick on the other side of the break, you can always give us a call at 888-526-2151. That is 888-526-2151. Or you can email us at questions@handsonapologetics.com. And by the way, that's all one word. And we'd love to hear from you. We are always getting emails and questions and such, and we appreciate it. Let's see. Anything else? I believe we are all set to jump into our exercises. And indeed, our finding the fallacy, like I said, it's a propaganda technique. It's grabbing the rhetorical middle. And the power of this particular propaganda technique is that no one likes to be on the fringe. No one wants to be the odd one out. No one wants to be the extremist, the radical. There's the comfortable middle. Everybody loves the comfortable middle. And so you want to be mainstreaming it. At least that's the emotional drive of most people. And of course, it's a really wrong way to evaluate truth, isn't it? Because if 1 + 1 = 2 is radical, then it's good to be radical, right? It's good to be fringe if people don't believe 1 + 1 = 2, because you're correct. But nevertheless, there is that emotional aspect to it. And so what happens in discourse when they use the propaganda technique, what they do is they paint their opponents as being on the extreme. And this was later labeled triangulation. You take different views. You show, hey, this view is one extreme, the opposite view is the other extreme, and I end up being in the middle, right? I am just a main line, middle of the road position, nothing radical here. And this is used quite effectively in the past, especially within the political sphere. It's used a little bit in apologetics, not so much. But anyway, so it paints you as being in the middle of the road, mainstreaming things, while people who oppose you are the radicals, the extremists. And the one way to defeat any kind of propaganda technique is to recognize when it's being used. And just realize that painting a person as an extreme, radical, fringe thing doesn't prove that they are, right? It doesn't prove that they are. It's just a matter of positioning yourself in debate. And that's what makes this particular propaganda technique so effective. That's why it's used an awful lot, because it will take some very radical positions, and by grabbing the rhetorical middle, you can make it appear more palatable to the populace. So that is our finding the fallacy for today, the grabbing the rhetorical middle technique. Let's move on to the Meet the Early Church Father today, who is Pope St. Damasus I. He reigned from 366 to 384. And Pope St. Damasus I is remembered for having commissioned Jerome's translation of the Scriptures, and also for having changed the liturgical language of the Roman Church from Greek to Latin. So, Pope St. Damasus I is the ancient equivalent of, the new Mass, which I'm sure many people preferred the ancient liturgy of the Greek and didn't like the newfangled Latin liturgy, but nevertheless, he's famous for that. Also, I think even more so is his commission of a fresh translation by St. Jerome. Up until that time, sacred scripture, of course, was available in the West in Latin, and the Latin translations, known as the Old Latin, had run into some problems. Through several generations of copyists copying other copies, it tended to not be as reliable. In fact, Jerome says that there were as many different versions of the Old Latin as there were manuscripts. And so there was a need for a fresh translation that to be made, and Pope Damasus chose St. Jerome because St. Jerome was a trilinguist, which was very rare at that time. He, of course, knew Latin. He also knew Greek, and he knew Hebrew and a little bit of Aramaic. So he was definitely the man for the job. And so Pope St. Damasus said, hey, Jerome, I want you to go and make a nice, fresh translation of sacred scripture, which he did. Started off with the Psalms and then proceeded from there. And ultimately, Pope Damasus's Bible, through Jerome, became known as the Vulgate and the official Latin translation of the Catholic Church. In fact, we still use the Vulgate today for any official pronouncements and documents. He's also known for the Tome of Damasus, and this St. Ambrose of Milan was instrumental in having a council meet in Rome, hoping to obtain the reinstallment of Maximus in Constantinople and Paulinus in Antioch. His ends were thwarted before the council ever met. Nevertheless, the council was convoked by the Emperor Gratian, and the principal metropolitans of the West assembled around Damasus for the Council of Rome, which was in 382 AD. And there are various documents that are attributed to this council, like the Tome of Damasus, the Faith of Damasus, Confession of Faith, the Confession of Catholic Faith of Damasus, and the Epistle. It is, in fact, an instrument of, all of these things were an instrument of the Council of Rome, according to Jurgen's faith of the early fathers. We have already noted, Jurgen says, that an Arabic collection of the 23 anathemas, which some have supposed is a summation of the doctrinal tome drawn by the Council of Constantinople of 381, is in fact virtually identical to the Tome of Damasus. St. Ambrose of Milan was present in the Council of Rome, and it's unlikely that it actually drew up the so-called Tome of Damasus. It's a work that evolved upon Ambrose. Also, associated with this Council of Rome is another decree. It's known as the Decree of Damasus, and this is the list of New and Old Testament books, and includes, by the way, the Deuterocanonical books of the Old Testament. And that's our Meet the Early Church Father for today, Pope St. Damasus I. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about what every Catholic needs to know about Islam.
Jesus said in Matthew 26, "Stay awake and pray that you may not enter into temptation." According to St. Ephrem, Jesus, who feared nothing, experienced fear and asked to be freed from death, although he knew it was impossible. How much more must we persevere in prayer before temptation assails us, so that we may be freed when the test has come? May God grant that we may withstand temptation and carry out His will in all things.
Did you know my mom's gonna have a baby?
She is? Will it be a boy? Or will it be a girl?
We don't know yet, but we heard the heartbeat and my dad said this is gonna be someone very special.
You mean like being a president? Or maybe a doctor?
Well, probably maybe like a singer or dancer, I think.
Hello, my name is Marianne Koharski. I'm the director of Pro-Life Across America. We know that every baby is a miracle and has the potential to do great things. If you know someone who is pregnant or in need of alternatives or assistance, or would like to support the work of Pro-Life Across America, please call 1-800-366-7773 or visit our website at prolifeacrossamerica.org. Pro-Life Across America is non-political and totally educational.
Pro-Life Across America, the Billboard people.
This is Terry Barber. I want to thank you for your support here at Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Here's an easy way to do it. If you're going to sell or buy a house, call Real Estate for Life, 877-543-3871, because they're going to get you a Christ-centered agent to purchase your home or to sell your home. And at the close of escrow, a portion of his commission goes right back to Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Call 877-543-3871. Thank you so much for your support.
Now, back to Hands-on Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands On Apologetics. And we are going to talk about Islam and what every Catholic needs to know about Islam. And to help us do that, we have William Kilpatrick with us. William Kilpatrick earned his master's degree in education from Harvard University and his doctorate in counseling psychology at Purdue University. He was a professor in the education department at Boston College for more than 30 years. His articles on Islam have appeared in the Investor Business Daily, Front Page Magazine, Jihad Watch, Catholic World Report, Catholic Answers, and other publications. Kilpatrick is the author of several books, including Christianity, Islam, and Atheism, The Struggle for the Soul of the West, which is available through Ignatius Press. And for more on his work, you can visit his website, which is turningpointproject.com. And William Kilpatrick, welcome to Hands On Apologetics.
Oh, thank you. It's good to be with you.
Yeah, it's great to be with you as well. We haven't made acquaintances, but I did read your book, and it's a fascinating study. I'm just curious, what got you interested in Islam?
Well, after 9/11, I think everyone was interested in Islam, and I realized there was a great deal I didn't know, and so I started reading up gradually at first, and eventually I began writing on the subject. But that's sort of the subject of the current book, that we don't know a great deal about Islam, and there's a lot that we need to know for our own safety and security. And a lot of the things that we think we know about Islam really aren't true. There's a lot of misinformation, a kind of disinformation campaign by the secular media, and the church hasn't done a great deal to help. They sort of fall in line with this Pollyannish view of Islam that you get through the media. So people don't know enough of what they should know, and a lot of what they do know is just untrue, or it's misleading.
Yes, yeah. It seems like the West has kind of fallen asleep, maybe have amnesia about its past dealings with Islam. So has Islam changed, or is it the West view of Islam that's changed?
Well, no, Islam hasn't changed. In fact, it's gotten more aggressive in recent years. There was a period of moderation in the Islamic world for most of the 20th century, really. Islamic nations were much more moderate, much more westernized, secularized. They wore miniskirts in Tehran and Cairo, and people weren't as serious about Islam as they had been in the past. But then everything changed with the Ayatollah Khomeini and the Iranian Revolution of 1979. And he not only conducted a revolution in Iran, but he tried to spread that revolution throughout the Islamic world, much as the French tried to spread the ideas of the French Revolution back in the early 1800s.
Yes, yeah. So, but why didn't the West pick up on this kind of radicalization, or just kind of shaking itself out of Western influence, I guess, and returning back to its roots? How is it that the West came up with, like you said, a kind of Pollyannish view of Islam?
Well, part of it is due to the influence of what I would call stealth jihad or cultural jihad, a sort of campaign by Muslim groups to co-opt and influence various social institutions such as schools, media, academia, big business, big tech, courts, and even churches and political parties too, to present. And Saudi Arabia, for example, has poured billions of dollars into this sort of propaganda campaign presenting a sort of a smiley-faced version of Islam to the world. And I think a lot of people in the West fell for that, and also in the church. And the other thing, of course, is that we ourselves were enamored of multicultural ideology, the idea that the other is always right and we are always wrong. That's kind of an oversimplification.
Yeah.
But the idea that other cultures have been victims of Western imperialism and colonialism, and we don't really understand them, and we should try to understand them and appreciate them more, and we sort of went overboard on that. And one result is this false narrative about Islam that now prevails, that it's a religion of peace and justice, and that jihad really means a spiritual struggle, not an armed struggle, and so forth. And as one of the main points of the book is that the church also has gone overboard on this. I mean, in days past, the church was the most reliable source of information on Islam, but now it's not really particularly reliable. Much of what it says about Islam is misleading, and as a result, Catholics are left complacent and unprepared for the real thing. They're unprepared for the kind of things that are happening to Christians now in Muslim lands in Nigeria and Syria and Pakistan, and well, you could go on and on.
Yeah, so multiculturalism ultimately leads to a blindness of, that everyone's equal, everyone's accepted, and uncritically accepting other cultures, and which has led to basically a kind of willful blindness in terms of.
Well, that's true.
In terms of what exactly is underneath all this.
I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Oh no, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, multiculturalism is basically a form of relativism that all cultures and all religions are basically equal and equally good, and therefore we shouldn't be criticizing other cultures or other religions. They're just as good as ours, and you can't really say what's better and what's worse. But of course, the trouble with diversity is that if diversity is the ultimate standard, how do you judge between different diversities? How can you tell what's a good diversity and a bad diversity? How can you tell that honoring your wife is any better than killing your wife if she displeases you? So it's left us without any ultimate standards of right and wrong. And so, and as I say, the church has followed along with this, giving Catholics the impression that Islam and Catholicism share a great deal of common ground, and that they even share the same values, the same basic values. And this is very misleading, and as I say, it leaves Christians complacent and unprepared. Just as we were unprepared, for example, for rioting in the streets here in America 10 months ago, who would have believed that Marxist mobs would be occupying city streets and burning down buildings and toppling statues of Jefferson and Washington and Columbus, so nobody saw that coming.
Right.
But that was also the result of people being complacent and being given a false narrative about Marxism and leftism. The narrative basically that there was nothing to fear on the left. And all of this starts, of course, in the schools and the colleges, just as students have been given a false narrative about communism and Marxism because most of their professors are Marxists. They've also been given a false narrative about Islam. And I can explain why that is a little bit later.
Yeah. So, one point you made in your book is that appeasement leads to aggression. It actually fosters aggression rather than fosters peace.
Well, that's certainly been the case. I mean, we should know that from the history of the last 100 years, the Nazi aggression and the appeasement of Nazi aggression by the Western powers, England, France. We stayed out of it for the longest time, and we believed Hitler's lies of propaganda, that he didn't really have any ambitions outside of Germany. Well, all that proved false, and I think we're in a similar position today, that all over the world, Islam is being appeased. For example, in Europe, European law is slowly ceding to Sharia law, so that the European Court of Human Rights ruled that blasphemy laws, in effect, superseded laws of free speech. There was a case of an Austrian woman who had given a seminar in which she mentioned the fact that Islam, Muhammad had married his first wife when she was 9 years old. Or actually married her when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9, and she was sued and brought to court for defamation of a religion. In other words, basically for committing blasphemy against Islam. And the Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg upheld that, so that the rights of Islam not to be offended, or the rights of Muslims not to be offended, took precedence over her free speech. And of course, what you said was quite true. Muhammad did marry this young woman, Aisha, when she was 6, and he did consummate the marriage when she was 9. That's quite true, but truth doesn't matter. It's narrative that matters. And the truth that she spoke contradicted narrative, and so, well, luckily she got off with a fine. Possibly in the future, for that you could go to jail.
Right. Wow. So it didn't matter whether what she said is true. It was just because it was considered blasphemous that she got fined, and like you said, it was subordinated to free speech. Well, I hear the music coming up. We're chatting with William Kilpatrick and about his new book, What Catholics Need to Know About Islam. Stay tuned, folks. More to come on the other side of the break.
Welcome, Daniel. You're on the line. What's on your mind, brother?
Hi, I just wanted to share a testimony about Virgin Most Powerful Radio. I had a buddy at work who, he's a lukewarm Catholic guy, and I wanted him to start listening to the Terry and Jesse show, so I kept telling him to download the app, and he kept putting me off. So one day, I grabbed his phone and I downloaded the app for him. I went on vacation, and I kept telling him to listen to it. He was kind of put me off. I came back from vacation. He comes to my cubicle, and he says to me, "Hey, man, I've been listening to Terry and Jesse's show, and it's great." And it's made a big impact in his life. The guy, he's going to weekly adoration a couple times a week. He goes to the Mass in the morning. He's an on-fire Catholic, and he promotes the Terry and Jesse show in the Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
Daniel, what a testimony. And I want to encourage our listeners to get those cards by going to virginmostpowerfulradio.org and do what Daniel's doing. Go out and spread the faith by inviting people to listen to Virgin Most Powerful. Daniel, thanks for your testimony, brother. God love you.
You're welcome.
If you shop on Amazon.com, there's an easy way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Just visit smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center under the desired charity. Now, when you log into your Amazon account and purchase products, a portion of it will automatically go to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio at no cost to you. Thanks in advance for supporting CRC and VMPR, and may God richly bless you and your family.
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show. And they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow! That's 80%! realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
This is Jesse Romero. You're listening to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda on Virgin Most Powerful Radio.
And welcome back, everybody. We're chatting with William Kilpatrick, the author of What Catholics Need to Know About Islam. It is put out by Crisis Publications, Sophia Press. You can check that out at sophiapressinstitute.com. And William, so we have a mixed bag. I mean, I think the average Catholic in the pew, if they know anything about Islam, it's generally what they see on media, social media, that type of thing. What do we need to know about Islam that isn't being presented through these streams?
Well, it's not a religion of peace, so that's very clear if you read the Quran. And it's not a religion that holds a great deal in common with Christianity or Catholicism. There are surface similarities, but there are deep divisions. For example, in many ways, it's an anti-Christian religion, and most of the basic tenets of the faith are rejected. The divinity of Christ is rejected. The Trinity is rejected. God is not a Trinity, and if you say He is, you are cursed by Allah, and maybe we'll come after you too. Christ was not crucified, and there was no resurrection. So it's not just some minor problems between the two faiths. These are very major, basic faiths of Catholicism that are rejected and attacked by Muslims, and particularly by Muslim theologians and apologists.
Yeah, it's shirk, right? If you hold to there's no God but one, and so they consider us to be committing shirk, right? Because we believe in the Trinity. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, I missed one word. They consider us to be...
basically, the worst sin you could commit is polytheism.
Oh, yes.
So they don't look at us as neutral. They look at us as essentially polytheists, because we believe in the Trinity.
Well, exactly. And, so it's understandable, I suppose, that the media would cover up for those aspects of Islam that don't synchronize with the West, but for the Church to do it is very disturbing. For example, in the Catechism, paragraph 941, I think it is, I always get it mixed up whether it's 941 or 841, but it says, together with us, they adore the one merciful God. And, well, yeah, in one sense, that's true, in the sense that there's only one God who is listening to prayers, and so if prayers are offered with a sincere heart to God, then He listens to them. In that sense, I suppose, it's the same God. But as I said, otherwise, we think of God as a Trinity, and we believe that Christ is the Son of God. And Muslims believe that Christ is a Muslim prophet whose main job was to prophesy the coming of Muhammad. So there is a Jesus in the Quran, And of course, that's acknowledged in Nostra Aetate that they revere Jesus and honor Mary, but it's not the same Jesus. The Jesus in the Quran is quite a different person than the Jesus of Nazareth. For one thing, you can hardly even call him a person. He's just kind of like a vague voice, disembodied voice that comes in and out of the narrative, and really doesn't have much of a role to play in the Quran, except once in a while to vehemently deny that he ever claimed to be God.
Right. Yeah, that's true. That's the one thing.
And so I think it's, very short-sighted of the church in the hopes of improving relations with Islam to sort of grant them so much theological territory. And constantly you hear these calls on the church for, let's declare our solidarity with Islam, let's defeat Islamophobia. Well, why do you want to declare your solidarity with a made-up religion, with a made-up revelation? Do Catholic theologians, the ones who wrote Nostra Aetate, for example, do they believe that Muhammad received a valid revelation from God or not? And if he didn't, why would we want to, if he was lying about it, why would we want to declare our solidarity with this religion that's based on lies and the megalomania of one particular man?
Yeah, especially, in the 60s, when Islam was pretty much inert, right? You didn't have the Ottoman Empire anymore. You had Ataturk secularizing Turkey. That they certainly held out an olive branch that, we do have some things in common. We should dialogue. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to, when the situation has changed, that we remind ourselves about, the particulars of Islam, and that there are lots of things that are incompatible with Catholicism.
Well, that's a good point. I mean, I think a lot of churchmen are still living in the past, in the 1960s, when indeed Islam was more inert, as you say. It was a more peaceful, more moderate Islam. King Farouk in Egypt and the Shah of Iran, who was quickly secularizing and modernizing Iran. Ataturk and secular rulers who were sort of keeping down the more radical members of society, so that there was really a weakening of faith in Islam, a sort of decoupling of faith. And yes, it was a more moderate Islam, and it did seem then that it was possible to reach some kind of reconciliation. And that mindset is still with us, unfortunately, but as I believe I said earlier, everything changed with the Iranian Revolution, which was a reformation of Islam back to original Islam, back to the text, the Quran and the Sirah and the Hadith, back to the kind of Islam that Muhammad had founded.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, so things are a lot different than they were back in the 60s. Although I think the roots of today is there, is back in the 7th, 8th century, right? Back with the origins of Islam, always had these key beliefs, and they never changed.
Well, yeah, basically the 40s, 50s, 60s was an aberration in Islam, a departure from the road that Muhammad had set out. And what happened is that Islamic countries became enamored of the West, and before that, of course, there was the dissolution of the Ottoman Empire and the takeover of Turkey by Ataturk, and many Muslims realized that the West was superior in many ways to Islam. It had better technology and better schools and better medicine and better governments, and they tried to emulate the West, and many decoupled from Islam. But as I say, Muhammad's Islam came roaring back in 1979. And it's a different picture, and Catholics need to understand that things have changed dramatically.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, we only have a couple minutes before our next break. I just really want to quickly ask, in your opinion, is it possible for a predominantly Islamic country to adopt a democratic government?
Not as long as Islam remains predominant. Many Islamic countries have Sharia law as their constitution. I can't remember specifically offhand. Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and I think possibly Pakistan and a few others. And as long as that's the case, then they really can't have a democratic representative type of government. And back in, I can't remember exactly when it was, the 90s, I think, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, 57 Islamic countries got together and signed the Cairo Declaration of Human Rights, which was their answer to the United Nations Declaration of Universal Rights. They couldn't sign on to the United Nations Declaration because they basically didn't believe in universal rights. They believed in that Muslims have, by dint of their connection with Muhammad, have special rights that are not granted to other people. And in fact, in Sharia law, Christians and Jews are considered to be only 1/3 the value of a Muslim. And a Muslim woman is only 1/2 the value of a Muslim man. So, I wouldn't hold out much hope under the current circumstances for that kind of democratization.
Right. Yeah. Good point. And again, that's Sharia law. Like I would say, most Catholics in the pew don't have a clue what Sharia is, and so in many of their minds, I imagine they think it's just a different form of democracy, but it's quite different.
Oh, it's very, very different. In fact, it contradicts much of the Constitution and the Bill of Rights.
All right. I hear the music coming up. We're chatting with William Kilpatrick and talking about his book, What Catholics Need to Know About Islam. Stay tuned. More to come on the other side of the break.
Help the Helpless, a Minnesota St. Paul nonprofit organization chaired by Father of Tyr and volunteers, is humbly asking you for your kind support to help the poor and the handicapped children in India and Ecuador. Through financial support from the Help of the Helpless benefactors, the children are provided with clothing, food, education, shelter, and the teachings of the Catholic Church. The mission is to help children thrive and become self-sufficient young adults leading productive lives. We also provide aid to poor families in Ecuador with food baskets, medicines, medical assistance, and help with funeral needs for the deceased. The work in India is done by Father Antonio's organization, St. Mary's. In Ecuador, the work is being done by the Servant Sisters of the Home of Mother. You can call us at 877-762-8857. To learn more, please visit our website, www.helpthehelpless.org. God bless you.
If you shop on Amazon.com, there's an easy way to support Virgin Most Powerful Radio. Just visit smile.amazon.com and type in Catholic Resource Center under the desired charity. Now, when you log into your Amazon account and purchase products, a portion of it will automatically go to support. If you shop on Amazon.com, there's an...
Buying or selling your home or your business property? This is Terry Barber. Real Estate for Life underwrites the Terry and Jesse Show, and they can connect you to one of 900 pro-life real estate agents around the world. And when they receive their referral fee, they will give 80% of it to a pro-life organization. Wow, that's 80%. realestateforlife.org, 877-LIFE-US1.
Now, back to Hands-On Apologetics with Gary Machuda. If you'd like to join the conversation, call 888-526-2151. Here's Gary.
And welcome back, everybody, to Hands-On Apologetics, and we are interviewing William Kilpatrick. And since my Skype's up, I can actually show the cover of the book. It's What Catholics Need to Know About Islam. It's available through Sophia Institute Press. And, there's so much foggy information Catholics in the pew have about Islam. Like I said, Sharia law, most Catholics don't know what's involved with that. And like you pointed out, Sharia isn't like our law, which is based on natural revelation, natural law, and also divine revelation that couples with it. But it's really positive revelations. It's what Allah has supposedly revealed to Muhammad. And so it doesn't, you come up with strange things like not every person is equal.
Right, and the death penalty for apostasy is so that there's no freedom of religion. You can convert to Islam, but you can't leave, because if you do, you risk getting killed. Right. And the cruel and unusual punishments such as amputation for theft and other cruel kinds of punishments. But if I could get back to this business of the media cover-up of what's going on and the distortion. A good example is back in, I think it was in March of 2019, you had this attack on two mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand by a white supremacist, and he managed to kill 50 people inside the two mosques. And that was the main news for at least a month after that. Just morning and night, that's all you heard about was a massacre in Christchurch and interviews with people in New Zealand and so forth. I'm sure you remember that. But at the same time, thousands of Christians were being slaughtered in Nigeria at the hands of Muslims. You've heard very little about that from the media, so you get the impression that mosques are being attacked by Christians all the time. Well, this guy wasn't a Christian, and that's not true. Attacks on mosques are a rarity, and in fact, most attacks, the majority of attacks on mosques, are committed by other Muslims who don't happen to agree with a particular brand of Muslim of Islam that you subscribe to. Another example is just a few days after that mosque attack in which 50 Muslims were killed in New Zealand. In Italy, a school bus driver, just 5 days after Christchurch, a school bus driver in Italy, a Muslim man, hijacked his school bus and the 50 children that were in it and tried to set them all on fire. And what the church, the bus was blazing, but the police were able to get the children out in time. And yet that incident was hardly covered at all in the media. In fact, I don't. Do you remember it?
Honestly, I don't. But I don't really follow the news very closely, so I could have missed it.
Well, no, I made a point of following the news that day, and the day after I heard of it through a source through Jihad Watch, actually.
Mm-hmm.
And so I immediately turned to Google News to see when they would start reporting it. And I checked at 2 in the afternoon, and at 6 in the afternoon, and 8 at night, and at midnight, and the next morning, and the next afternoon, and days after, they never even mentioned that. The spectacular news story, which was, a real human interest story about these little kids at the mercy of this crazy man. Very, very strange. But when I did check Google News, there were many, many, many stories about Christ Church and the attack on the mosque. So they give you a very warped impression of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think that's the tip of the iceberg, especially for anyone who frequents Jihad Watch, which reports all these things going around the world. We maybe get 1% of Islam on Christian violence, but like you said, when there are those occasions where maybe not even a Christian would perpetrate violence, that's headline news in Western mainstream media.
Well, what you say is quite true. I would guess about the same, that we only hear about 1% of all the jihad attacks in the world, if that.
Yeah.
And in the book, actually, I have a memory quiz. Do you remember such and such a jihad attack back in 2006 or 2004, like the attack on the school, the elementary school in Beslan, Russia, in which 30 terrorists took over the school, and after it was all over, about 330 people were dead, most of them school children, and that was in 2004, and at the time it was one of those heart-wrenching stories that we thought we would never forget. But if you mention Beslan, Russia, massacre to people nowadays, you just get a blank stare.
Yeah.
The same with the bombings of the commuter trains in Madrid, Spain. The same with the bombings and attacks on Mumbai in 2008. Setting fire to the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. Many of these very, large-scale attacks, which resulted in many deaths, just slip out of our memory. And so we have this forgetfulness, and the forgetfulness breeds complacency. And of course, the media won't help us. They won't really tell us what's going on, and they give a distorted picture.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so of course, we talked about how multiculturalism feeds into this. There's also political motives too. It seems that the parties have certainly split into two camps, where anything that's critical of Islam is considered a political statement. You want to speak to that, politics?
Well, sure. We've got this notion of Islamophobia, which was just kind of piggybacks on the notion of homophobia, that Muslims are victims of irrational hatred and irrational fear, and please go easy on these poor victims. And so it's become practically a crime to criticize Islam anywhere in the world. It's already a crime in Europe, as I pointed out, but it could well become a crime here because the Organization of the Islamic Cooperation and various other Muslim groups are continually pushing to make criticism of Islam a crime. But they really don't have to bother, because we're sort of self-censoring ourselves. The media just won't run stuff that puts Islam in a bad light. And so we're left in the dark. And it's not just television news, it's big tech also that has ways of censoring the bad news about Islam, censoring the truth through methods that I don't even understand, having to do with algorithms and that type of thing.
Yeah.
But sometimes outright banning. Facebook will suspend someone's Facebook page. Twitter will do the same. Google will refuse to run certain videos that are considered critical of Islam. So, we're not just battling jihad and stealth jihad. We're battling all the people in our own society who are covering up for Islam and defending it, people in schools and in media and even in the church.
Yeah, so what's your prescription for turning things around, or can it be turned around?
Well, I think it can be turned around. I mean, once again, I point back to the fact that it was turned around back in the last century. And and I do have prescriptions in my book for putting Muslims back into that stage, certain incentives that would create a weakening of belief in Islam. And one thing particularly that people in the church who are qualified to do it would be criticism of the Quran, because the Quran is one of the main motivators for jihad. And if you can sort of weaken belief in the Quran, that maybe it wasn't really a revelation from God, maybe that this warrior made it up, this warrior leader just confected the whole thing. And just reading the Quran, you get the idea that he's aware that this is going to be one of the criticisms, that it's an invented tale, that he made it up himself. And he keeps, every 15 pages or so, he denies that this is an invented tale. He says, do they say it is an invented tale? Let them produce one paragraph that matches anything in this sacred Quran. Well, in fact, if anyone bothered, any book you pull off the shelf is, from the point of composition and coherence, better written than the Quran. The Quran is a jumble. In fact, the literary critic and historian Thomas Carlyle called it a repetitive, jumble, difficult to understand, and he ends up by saying very stupid and short. And he was a fan of Muhammad's. He wrote a book calling Muhammad one of the heroes of history. But many other critics have said the same thing. The book just doesn't hold together, yet the claim is that it was written by God. And if that's true, then God is not a very good grammarian, and he's not a very good storyteller. And actually, much of what he writes is quite boring and tedious and repetitive.
Yeah. Well, William, hey, thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
That's William Kilpatrick. The book is What Catholics Need to Know About Islam by Sophia Press. Check it out, folks. Coming up next, High Impact Catholic Talk coming at you with the Terry and Jesse Show. Thank you so much for listening. God willing, we'll be back again Monday to do this thing we call Hands on Apologetics. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a great weekend.
In the 1990s, I lived and worked in Hollywood. But when my wife Betty's mom took ill, we relocated to Orange County. And it was during this time in our lives that I converted to Catholicism. Once my eyes were opened to the truth, I couldn't learn enough about the faith. But I had less free time than ever, especially with a long commute. That's when I discovered the real value of Catholic audio. Listening to cassette tapes transformed my daily commute into a miniature retreat. And that's the beauty of Virgin Most Powerful Radio today. Since the podcasts are archived, you can listen anytime on our smartphone app. I know how listening to Catholic audio can bring you closer to Christ and His Church. So I encourage you to visit the App Store or go to vmpr.org and download the app today. It just might change your life. I'm Matthew Arnold for Virgin Most Powerful Radio.